Alrighty. Well, good afternoon. It is afternoon after all. I was writing some comments there and I got to thinking I should tell some stories about some of the crazy people that I had these weird arbitrary run ins with in Perth and how I got to be probably the most hated man in that town. Because I believe I was, at least for a while, the most hated man in the town of Perth, Ontario, Canada, which is my hometown. Um, People really despise me. I even had people occasionally who didn't know me run me into the ground to my face. Um, they didn't know they were talking to me. They didn't know me. They just knew my name, and they knew the stories that were connected with me about all the bad stuff I would do. So they were, telling me what a bad prick I was, basically, and had no idea they were talking to the guy they were talking about. Um, but sometimes I just let them go on, and it was fun to listen to them, and to hear what an awful person I am, and to hear all the stories. I kind of got caught up on the gossip that way. Of course, people will never tell a full story, and so what happens is you get the part of the story where you come off looking like a piece of crap, but they don't talk about their role in the thing. Anyway, I'll tell you a few stories anyway here. Um, I had a 1947 Dodge Special Deluxe, what was called a D25 model, four-door sedan in the in the mid 90s, mid to late 90s. I owned that car, and it was a neat old car. It was big blue four-door sedan. It had the suicide doors. It had the old L-head 6, inline 6 engine in it. It had a free-in-the-tree transmission. You shifted the gears up on the steering column. You had a lever like what you see with automatic cars that have a steering column shifter, but it was a standard. You had a clutch. You had to push the clutch pedal down and you'd shift the gears. And you go first, neutral, second, and then third was straight down from second, and reverse was straight up from first, and you'd pull it toward you a little bit and pull it up again, and that was reverse. Anyway, um, I used to drive that thing, and I enjoyed it. Uh, but there was one day I had the hood open on the street, and I was doing something with the carburetor, and this guy came across the street. He had a tattoo parlor across the street from where I was, and he came across the street, and he was being friendly, and he was asking me about the car, and I was used to that. And by the late 90s, those cars weren't all that common anymore. So you get people come up and ask you questions about the car, or they want to tell you stories about some old car they used to have, or whatever. I didn't mind that. And anyway, the guy's asking me questions about the car. And then he comes around to the thing of, well, where did you get it? And I told him, I said I bought it from some people up on the Bay Road, which is a side road near to Smiths Falls, near to the town of Smiths Falls. Oh, he got mad. He said, so they sold this to you, but they wouldn't sell it to me. Now, what business do you have having this car when I tried to buy it and I couldn't buy it? And I said, well, look, I don't know what your story is. I said, yes, I did buy it. It's my car. If you feel that the people who had it for sale treated you unfairly, then your issue is with them, not me. So I said, I suggest you address that situation with them if you feel that they didn't use you right. I said, I had no difficulty dealing with them. They sold me the car. There was no issues. I don't know what to tell you, but yeah, it's my car. I own it. I bought it from them and I own it. It's mine. And I don't know anything about your situation and what your dealings with them were, but that had nothing to do with me. So there's no reason for you to be all hostile, in your dealings with me. I said, I didn't do anything other than buy a car. Well, he said, I wanted this car and they wouldn't sell it to me, and now you've got it. You shouldn't have it, and on like that. And I said, look, again, if you have an issue with how you were treated by those people, take it up with them. It has nothing to do with me. Well, he went away mad, and I thought to myself, there's going to be some fallout from this. I know it. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know something's going to happen. So, of course, I got extra vigilant. I was watching pretty closely, watching the car and watching my back in case I got jumped or something on the street, you know, because that used to happen on a regular basis, that I'd get jumped on the street, too. Anyway, there's various people that hated me for various reasons, but anyway, a couple of days go by and it's pouring rain one night. Now, I couldn't lock the doors of that car. When I bought the car, it didn't come with any door keys for the door locks. It just came with an ignition key, but no keys for the door locks. And I had ordered new door locks that were keyed and everything to go into it, but they sent me the wrong ones and they wouldn't fit. They were door locks for an early 1950s Dodge, and they wouldn't fit the 47. They were just they were just completely wrong for the 47 that I had. And so that used to happen quite often when I'd order parts for that car. I'd end up getting something different than what I ordered. Anyway, it ended up that I was watching pretty closely. It was pouring rain one night, and I look out and I see this guy. My car's parked down on the street. I'm upstairs in my apartment across the street from where the car was parked. I look out and I see my door's open, my driver's door is open, and that guy is down on his knees on the ground and he's working under the dashboard. He's got a flashlight and he's trying to do something under the dashboard. And I thought, you know, the son of a bitch is trying to hotwire the car. And of course, he was so stupid, he didn't realize that you could start that car pretty easily without having to do that. But all you needed was to open the hood and run a jumper wire from the ignition coil across to the battery. And then you didn't need the key. It would bypass the key. And it had a push button to actually turn the engine over to roll the starter. It was what was called a two-part ignition system, which is what cars had. Prior to the mid-1950s, that's what cars had. Instead of having just a key that you turn, and you turn it all the way to the right, and it engages the starter, and then when you let it go, it springs back to the run position. They didn't have that. What they had was you turn the key to the far right, and that turned the power on. And basically all the key was a kill switch. It was to turn the ignition system on and off. Then you push the button with your thumb. There was a spring-loaded push button you'd push with your thumb. Some cars had a foot pedal. If you heard the old saying, step on the starter, that goes back to when they had a foot pedal where you push a pedal on the floor, and it would actually, the pedal was connected to a thing that would come down and push a button on the top of the starter, which would actually engage the starter. It was like a mechanical linkage to the starter, basically. Anyway, my car had the push button on the dashboard. It didn't have the foot pedal, but if you went back, you know, say into the 1930s or the very early 40s, they did have a foot pedal as opposed to a push button. Anyway, all you had to do was run that jumper cable from the coil to the battery, and then you could get into it and push the button, and the car would start. But he obviously didn't know that. He cut my headlight wires is what he did. So he really didn't know what he was doing. He might have been able to do tattooing, but he certainly wasn't a mechanic. Anyway, and he wasn't a very good car thief either, especially if he couldn't steal a 1940s car. Those things were pretty easy to steal if that's what you wanted to do. Anyway, it ended up that I saw him, and he kept looking up at the windows. He seemed to know my apartment was up there, so he kept looking up, And he looked up and he saw me standing in the window, and he slammed the door. He popped up, jumped up, slammed the door, and he ran down the street, acting as if he was jogging in the pouring rain. Anyway, I thought he's going to come back. So I turned out all my lights and I waited. And a little while later, he did come back, and he come back around the corner, and he's looking up at my windows. And of course, I got the whole apartment in darkness at that point. He probably thought I'd gone to bed because it was late at night. And he opened up my door, and he started fiddling with my wires again. So I took the claw hammer out of the toolbox, and I snuck out of the building, down along beside the building. And I come across the street with the claw hammer, and I let a roar out of me, and he jumped up and he took off running, and I chased him down the street with the claw hammer for a couple of blocks. I couldn't catch him. I don't have a lot of stamina, and after a couple of blocks I was done. So that was it for me anyway. But had a 1.5 or 2 block run, and that was it, you know. So I didn't get him anyway. But he cut my headlight wires. The next day I had to repair my headlight wires so I would have headlights again. Well, a couple of days after that, I come downstairs, and the guy, well, I didn't know who had done it, but my gas cap was missing. And I often did have things missing off cars. People would break my radio antenna off, or they'd break my hood ornament off, or they'd steal a hubcap, or they'd hit the car, they'd put dents in it. I had my cars egged too. A lot of people like to egg my cars. This is the stuff that happened. They'd carve profanities into my paint. They'd take like a knife or a key or a nail or something. And of course, they were spreading rumors around town about me that I was a pedophile, so I often had the word pedophile scraped into my paint. Now, the local police didn't like me any better than the townspeople did, and they would love to have gotten me for something like that. If they could have locked me up for pedophilia, they'd have done it in a heartbeat. They would love to have been able to do that. And the reason I never got locked up for pedophilia is because I'm not a pedophile. You know? But if I had been a pedophile, they'd have got me pretty quick because they watched me very closely. Anyway, because they always had that hope that they were going to get me for something. Anyway, it ended up that I'm pretty sure it was that guy that poisoned my gas tank. That turns out that's what had actually happened. My gas tank had been poisoned, and I guess he didn't put my gas cap back after he put something in my gas. Took the engine out of the car. Just wrecked the engine. When I started the car up and all that crap went through the engine, it just destroyed it, you know. But it didn't destroy it all at once. It still ran after that, but it ran really rough, and it didn't run very good. But I could at least get around in it. And I knew the clock was ticking, though, that the engine was going to fail soon, which it did. It did fail. So then my old friend Cliff Kelford, who was one of the few townspeople who actually liked me, he was the fellow that had the scrapyard. He let me store the car out on his property. And so he let me put the car in a back corner of the scrapyard anyway. And the car sat there for several years. It sat there until Cliff died. I always wanted to get it going again, but I just never was able to. Never had the money to do anything with it. Never had the strength to do anything with it. And always wanted to, but it just never happened. And so, it sat there for a long time until Cliff died, and then I had to get it out of there because the family didn't want it there, and so on. Cliff's daughter-in-law actually was the one that really pushed to have it out of there because she didn't like me. And she's a woman, her nickname was the Cunt. And she was proud of it, just to give you an idea of what she was like. But anyway, even in their family, that's what they called her. And she wore that as a badge of honor, you know. But anyway, it ends up that I had to get the car out of there. I ended up selling it to Cliff's grandson just for scrap value, basically, because I had no place to put it or anything. And of couldn't stay there unless it belonged to them, really. So I just sold it to him. And it is what it is, you know. I mean, I can't be mad, really. It just is what it is. That's all. But getting back to the story, though, during the time it sat in the scrapyard, there was a local guy who came to see me, and he said he wanted to buy my old car. Oh, I told him the car wasn't for sale. He come and knocked on my door of my apartment, and he wanted to buy the car. Said he would give me $1,200 for the car. Well, I told him the car wasn't for sale. And I asked him why he wanted it, and he said he wanted it for his wife. And I said, well, it's unusual. I said, your wife must be a very unusual woman if she wants, if she wants that car. I said, not many women like those old cars, you know, that they'd want one of those. And he said, oh yeah, she's an unusual woman. He said, that's why I married her. And I said, well, good for you, you know. Glad you're happy in your marriage and everything. That's a wonderful thing. But I said, the car isn't for sale. I'm sorry. And he also had told me that I'd have to sign it over to him and trust him to pay me. That he wouldn't pay me right away, but he'd need the paperwork right away, which didn't sound right either. And I had told him, I said, well, it isn't for sale, but if it was, I said, I'd be wanting my money before I'd sign it over, you know. But I said, it doesn't matter because it's not for sale anyway, you know, so it's kind of irrelevant. But anyway, that's what he said. Just sign it over to me now and trust me to come and bring you $1,200 later, which I said, no, that's not, you know, that's not how things are done. And the car's not for sale anyway, so it doesn't matter. But if it were, I wouldn't do that, you know. Anyway, I'm out to see my friend Cliff at the scrapyard a few days after that. And he asked me, he said, did you sell your car? You know, the old car back there. He said, did you sell that to somebody? I said, no, I didn't. And I said, why do you ask? I said, I had a guy come around asking about it, though. And he said, well, he said, I'm just asking because so-and-so, and this was the guy that had come to see me, was back there showing it to somebody. And it sounded like he was trying to sell it to them. And he was talking as if it was his car. And I said, well, no, Cliff, I didn't sell it to anybody, you know. But I said, that guy you're talking about, he's the guy who came to see me. He wanted to buy it, and I didn't sell it to him. Anyway, about 6 months later, I met that same guy on the street, right downtown on the street. I'm walking one way, and he's walking the other way. And he says, you son of a bitch. He said, you effing son of a bitch. And he was in a rage. And I said, well, it's good to see you again, too. What's your problem, you know? And he says, you owe me $5,000, you son of a bitch. He said, you cheated me out of $5,000 and you owe me $5,000. And I said, how do you figure I owe you $5,000? And how do you figure I cheated you out of $5,000? I said, I'm not understanding any of this. And he says, I could have sold that car of yours for $5,000. And he said, and you effed me out of that. And I just looked at him and I said, look, it wasn't your car to sell. I said, what business did you have trying to sell my car? I said, you came to me wanting to buy it, and I told you it wasn't for sale. And what, and then you figured you were going to sell it? I said, how does that work? I said, no, it's not your car. You don't sell other people. You don't get to sell somebody else's car. What's wrong with you? You know? I said, if you had somebody that wanted to pay $5,000 for the car, and you were a decent person, you'd have sent that person my way, instead of coming to me and trying to cheat me out of my car. And I said, I'll bet I wouldn't have gotten that $1,200 you offered me either. If I had signed it over, I said, you'd have taken that paperwork. And I said, I never saw you. I wouldn't have saw you again. And you'd have put the full $5,000 in your pocket, you know, that you got for that car. I said, that's what you would have done, isn't it? I said, you tried to cheat me and it didn't work. That's what happened. Anyway, he was hopping mad. Away he went. And next time I saw him after that, he was friendly as anything, though, just as if nothing had happened. You know? People are strange. Anyway, that's one story. I'll tell you one more quick story. This video is getting kind of long. Again, I was out to see. I had some business with my friend Cliff that had the scrap yard. I owed him some money. I used to be able to go in there and get parts if I needed parts for a car, and he trusted me to pay him, and I always paid him. If I needed anything that day, on a particular day, I could just go get it. I didn't have to ask for it, or I didn't have to pay on my way out or anything like that. I'd just take what I needed, and then I'd come around and I'd tell Cliff, I'd say, you know, I got such and such off such and such a car last week. What do I owe you for that? And he was always really reasonable with me. He'd say, oh, give me $10, Tom, or give me $20 or whatever, depending on what it was. And I'd pay him for it, you know, and we got along great. There was never any issues. But anyway, one day I go out there. It was in the evening time, and this man came out of the house. And as we're passing in the driveway, I said to the guy, is he in there? And he said, oh, yeah, he's in there. He's watching Dr. Phil. And I said, oh, Dr. Phil, you know, like that. And he turned around and he looked at me, and I could tell he didn't like that. And he said, do you have a problem with Dr. Phil? And I said, well, I'm not a big fan, no. But I said, I don't really believe in psychology, so I guess I don't really like any of them. But I said, no, I'm not a big fan of Dr. Phil. He said, what? He said, you don't believe in psychology. I said, no, I don't. He said, look, whoa, what do you mean you don't believe? How can you not believe in psychology? You're telling me you don't believe in psychology. How can you not believe in psychology? And I said, well, I just don't, that's all. I said, why don't we agree to disagree? You go about your business and I'll go about mine, and we'll just pretend this conversation never happened. Because I said, you seem to be getting really worked up. And I said, I'm not looking to fight with anybody. I'm just here to see Cliff. I didn't come here looking for any trouble. I said, you just go about your business and I'll go about mine, and we'll just agree to disagree. That's all. Well, he went off in a huff, gravel spinning off his tires and all the rest of it. I went in to see Cliff, and I asked Cliff about the guy because I didn't know if this was somebody who might be able to cause me some trouble. It might have been an off-duty cop or anything. I didn't know. He had the disposition of a lot of cops I've known, so that's why I wondered. Turns out he was the physiotherapist at the hospital, is who he was. I did find out later who he was. He was a Scotsman, immigrant from Scotland, you know, and he was a physiotherapist. He had a very strong Scottish accent. And very, very confrontational anyway. It ended up, several months went by, 5 months to be exact, and I know this because this came up during the second confrontation. I had a 1978 Oldsmobile Delta 88 sedan at the time. It was a rough old car, and I used it as a workhorse because I used to haul scrap metal and stuff. It was tough as nails, but it was rough. It had a cracked exhaust manifold, so you had to drive with the windows down so you didn't asphyxiate yourself. The roof used to leak when it rained. In the winter time, the rain would come through and soak the bent seat, soak right into it, and then it would freeze solid, so the bent seat would be a block of ice. You'd be sitting on a block of ice when you drove it and stuff, with the windows down in the wintertime. But it was a tough, tough car. Everybody hated that car. Except me. I actually really loved that car. Because it was just a tough, tough car, you know. And it just seemed like it would go on forever. And I owned that car for about 7 years. I paid $700 for it, and I drove it for like 7 years. When I first bought it, it was the only car I had for the first year. And then I bought a 1985 Chev Caprice Classic sedan for $350 cash, and the thing was like new. And I drove it for 5 or 6 years. But the 78 Oldsmobile, I kept it and I used it as a workhorse in order to keep the Chevy good for longer. Anyway, to take the stress off the Chev, which was a really nice car. So I drove the Chev for good, and I drove the Oldsmobile for working, is what I did for work, you know. Anyway, and I had a friend that had a house, and they let me park the Oldsmobile in beside their house when I wasn't using it. Because where I live downtown, we didn't have parking. I'd have to buy a parking permit from the town, and I'd have to constantly be moving the car in order to not have the town on my back about parking it in one space for too long, even with a permit. Anyway, I had a permit for the Chev, though, and I used to park it overnight and so on in the parking lot downtown and stuff. But anyway, I'm in the wrecking yard, and I'm taking parts off an early 80s Oldsmobile, because they were basically the same car. There was very little difference in them, and I needed some parts. So it was over in a yard that they called the far yard, which is where they used to pile stuff up and where the crusher used to come in. That was away from the main yard where you'd normally pick your parts. But I talked to Cliff, and I told him I needed parts off it, and he said, go ahead, take what you need, you know. So I went back in there, and you had to go down a hill to get into this upper yard. And I was the only one back there. And I had a long wrench with me. It's called a breaker bar, and it's basically a socket wrench handle that's long, and it's so that you can get torque in order to be able to better wrench on parts that are corroded, you know, bolts and nuts that are kind of rusted in and stuff, and also so you can reach places down inside the engine compartment where you wouldn't be able to reach with a regular wrench. The handle on this thing was about 3 feet long, and it was heavy steel, you know. And I had it there because I was using it. Anyway, I got my head in under the hood of this Oldsmobile, and I'm taking parts off it. And behind me, I hear somebody yelling. At first it was faint, but it was getting louder. They were coming in my direction. And I didn't know who it was, but they sounded really angry. And I thought, well, I'm the only one back here, so it has to be me they're after. So anyway, now they wouldn't have been able to see me from the road, but they would have saw my car parked up there. And it must have been that he recognized my car anyway. And that's when it was the Oldsmobile. I brought the Oldsmobile out there to wrench these parts off this other Oldsmobile. Anyway, I'm got my head under the hood. I'm wrenching on this old 82 or 83 Oldsmobile Delta 88 Brougham sedan. And I'm hearing this. I'm thinking, whoever it is, they sound mad. And they must be looking for me because there's nobody back here but me. And I don't really want to have my head under this car hood when they get here, because I don't really want the hood slammed down on my head. You know, and I have enough knowledge of the things men do in those situations to know that would happen. If I was coming up behind somebody and looking to hurt them, and they had their head under a car hood, that's what would happen. I'd slam that hood down as hard as I could on their head to get their attention, you know. So I know another man would do the same to me. Anyway, I pull my head out from under the hood, and I turn around, and this guy is walking toward me. He's about 50 feet away from me at that point. And he's waving his very severe look on his face. I didn't know who it was. I had no idea. Thick Scottish accent, but I had no idea who it was. And he's waving his finger like that, and he says, "I demand to know who in the hell you think you are." You know? And he kept saying that as he's moving in my direction. And when he got about 10 feet away from me, I picked up the breaker bar, and I told him, I said, "Unless you're looking to fight, you better stop where you are. What's your issue?" I said, "What's your problem?" And he says to me, he says, "I demand to know why it is that you think you have a right not to believe in psychology." You know, like that. And I'm looking at him, who are you? What do you, what? Who are you? What? You know, like that. Who are you? I said, what the hell? What's wrong with you? Who are you, anyway? He said, we had a conversation 5 months ago, and you told me you don't believe in psychology. Then I remembered him. I'd forgotten all about that, but then I remembered him. And I said, oh, yeah. I said, okay, I remember you. Now, did you say that? Yeah, okay, I know who you are now. Have you been ruminating over that conversation all this time? I said, really? What does it matter to you what I believe anyway? I said, I don't care what you believe. I couldn't care less what you believe. Believe in psychology, I don't care. I said, but I'm busy here. So I said, I'll tell you what, go believe in psychology somewhere else, because I said, I don't have time for your crap. And I'm not looking for a fight. I'm just taking parts off a car here. I said, and I don't understand what could possibly possess a man to do what you're doing right now. But I said, if you think you're going to fight with me, I said, I'm not going to fight with my fists. I said, it's not going to be that kind of a fight. So I said, I've got the weapon right here, and I won't hesitate to use it. And I said, one clout across the head with this, and you either be dead or a vegetable. So I said, don't come any closer. I said, in fact, the best thing you can do is walk backwards out of here. And I said, don't take your eyes off me, because you don't know what I might do. So he, again, started going on, demanding to know what made me think I had a right not to believe in psychology and all that, and it just went on and on. He finally left. He backed away from me at that point, and he stayed a good distance away from me, but continued to yell at me and to demand to know why I thought I had a right not to believe in psychology. And I told him, I said, I have a right to believe whatever makes sense to me. And I said, and you have that same right. But I said, you don't have a right to impose your beliefs on me any more than I do to impose mine on you. And I said, if you don't understand that, then, there's something, then the issue is with you. I said, not me. I said, I'm allowed to believe whatever I decide to believe. I said, it's none of your business. I said, go about your day and stop ruminating over stuff that doesn't matter. I said, I'd forgotten all about you. I didn't sit around obsessing over you and waiting for an opportunity to do something to you because we disagree. But I said, apparently, that's what you've done in my case, Anyway, he did eventually leave. And, again, I heard the gravel spinning and everything. He drove a little Saturn car, a little silver-colored Saturn car, and heard the gravel spinning off the wheels and everything as he left. I half expected something to have been done to my car when I came up there, but he didn't do anything to my car. I can't accuse him of that because he didn't. It's just that in my head, I had the idea that he might have. So when I got up there after I got the parts I needed, I took a good look at my car and it was fine. Nothing had been done to it. But then this guy, he went all around town and he told everybody that I had threatened him with a weapon and that he had done nothing. He was blameless and he had done nothing anyway, and I was just a crazy person. Threatened him with a weapon for no reason and all that. Anyway, that's just a couple of stories from my hometown. I could write a book. I really could, just on that topic alone, I could write a book of these crazy people that I ended up running into in that little town. And that was the reason that I didn't really care for her very much and why I got out, because it was bad. And things were at the point where it was really dangerous. Like, at some point, I was either going to end up killing or seriously hurting somebody, or somebody was going to end up killing or seriously hurting me. And so it was just time for me to go, and I recognized that, and I left. I still be a little paranoid when I go there. I do go back there pretty regularly, as you've seen in my videos. It's a pretty town. It's a real heritage town. It's quite pretty. But it's, there's an undercurrent there that isn't great. At least there was when I was there. I mean, I don't see any of these people around anymore. I rarely ever see a familiar face in Perth. Actually, very seldom do I see anybody I knew. So I don't know where all those people went, but anyway, I haven't had any issues when I've gone back, but I'm always kind of on edge and always expecting something to happen. And it may even come through in some of my videos that I'm nervous when I'm in Perth and that I'm hyper vigilant and kind of looking around and, you know, just waiting for the other shoe to drop, I guess you could say. But so far it hasn't happened, and I'm grateful for that. Hopefully it won't. That's all. Anyway, that's it. That's just a few stories anyway from my life and my hometown and things that I went through. The Oldsmobile that I was talking about, the 78 Oldsmobile, it finally laid down on me in the year 2011. And what happened was the transmission went. The transmission just went kaput, and that finished the car. It still ran. It had a 403 engine in it. That's what it had in it for an engine, a 403. They haven't built that engine since 1979. 1979 was the last year you could buy an Oldsmobile with a 403 in it. And I had a 78, so it was the second to last year that engine was available. Tough engine. Tough engine, very tough car. Ugly as sin. You know, that car, it was ugly as sin, but it was tough. I remember one time I parked it on the street, and I got out of it, and there were a couple of guys walking by, and one of them pointed at it and looked at the other, and he said, "There's the ugliest car in Perth, right there." And I thought to myself, you know, he's right. It actually is. It was a homely, ugly-looking car, but it was a tough car, and I liked it. I think I was the only one on the face of the earth that liked that car, but I did. I really liked that car, and I miss it, you know. It was a good car. It was rough and uncomfortable. It wasn't, you know, especially in the wintertime when you had the windows down and the seat was a frozen block of ice, basically, because of the water soaking into it. If you know, if it got warm a bit and it rained, all that would go into the car for the roof, because the roof leaked terrible. And then when the weather suddenly got cold again, it would just freeze into a solid block, you know. So you were sitting on basically on an ice, on a block of ice, really. Kept your arse cool anyway, I guess. I don't know. Might have been all right if it had been in the summertime, but in the heat of the summer, but in the wintertime it wasn't very nice. But anyway, that's it. We'll see you later.